Hello world, and welcome to another episode of Questions in Gaming, the one-stop shop to get answers from your favorite games. And if I'm being honest, today is a pretty special episode because we're covering Pokemon. Pokemon is my favorite game franchise, probably. I've grown up with Pokemon, I've seen it do wonderful games and games that I have pretty mixed opinions on. But today we're specifically covering one question in Pokemon, one of the most difficult questions in Pokemon. Who is the best starter? And in today's video, we're covering the Kanto region starters. I know that most people probably will know that there's a pretty normalized idea of who the best starter is, normally being either Squirtle or Bulbasaur. But going into this, I really did want to find a way to make someone else at least a contender. So, for the starters in Kanto, we have to consider a few things. First off, the Kanto region has been represented in 3 games. You have the original games, which I'll be calling the originals for this video. This is Pokemon Red, Blue-Green, depending on if you're in Japan or not, and Pokemon Yellow. The possible starters are Charmander, Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and in Yellow, Pikachu. We're going to group all these games together and consider who is the best in these games specifically. Alongside this, you have the remakes, being Fire Red and Leaf Green. This is just the original trio of Charmander, Bulbasaur, and Squirtle. No Pikachu included. And lastly is the Let's Go games, consisting of Pikachu and Eevee. Picking a starter is often considered the most difficult choice in all of Pokemon, right next to actually picking what version to buy. So, trying to figure out who is the best starter is going to be a tall task. So let's split this into sections. First off, we are going to do this in order. I'm going to start with who might be the worst, and we're going to end with who's probably the best. And sadly, in worst, although I did try to fit him in, was Charmander. Listen, Charmander is our first contestant, and the thing about Charmander is he just got better over time, but it wasn't soon enough. He has a bad matchup against Brock and Misty, the 2 first gym leaders, and by extension, the 2 most important. He's also weak to Giovanni, which is kind of just a moral victory. And he's also weak to a lot of Team Rocket. He should be good against the Elite Four, and you might say, oh, he has that late game advantage, but then you remember Lorelei has water-type Pokemon. Not only that, but his flying type doesn't really help him much. Especially not as much as it should against Bruno. In the remakes, though, Charmander has a significantly better appeal. Mainly, he gets Metal Claw earlier, meaning that he's not completely useless against Brock and Misty. He actually has a fighting chance, specifically against those rock and ground types from Brock or Giovanni. Against Misty, Metal Claw is a better option to things like Scratch, but still isn't ideal. But by then, most people would have Dragon Rage, so it works out. Second up, I'm going to have to talk about 4th place, Pikachu. Listen, he's a great Pokemon, and he is the mascot, but sadly, he just doesn't have what it takes. In Pokemon Yellow, Pikachu isn't ideal, especially considering that most people wouldn't evolve him. And to be fair, I don't really blame them, considering you get Thunder at level 50, meaning that if you did evolve him, then you normally would have subpar moves. He also is bad against Brock and Giovanni. Very bad. And sure, he's okay against most of the other ones, and he's pretty good against Misty. But even then, this is nowhere close to how good Ash's Pikachu is. He is good against Lorelei and Lance, and I'll give him that, but he also has a bad matchup against Bruno and an even worse one against Team Rocket. The rival in Kanto is pretty similar for all the starters across all the games. All of them have an okay matchup at best, and no one really stands out. I will give Pikachu one thing, which is the fact that in Let's Go, he goes from the 4th worst to someone who might be the best. If I was ordering this just in order of each game, I think Pikachu would stand a much better shot in Let's Go. He has an absurd move pool, and while his stats aren't great, it still helps that him and Eevee basically both turn into demigods overnight. His buffs to his moves pool and moveset overall are just incredible. Moving into the top 3, though, we need to start to talk about Eevee. Eevee is a Pokemon I had a lot of confliction ranking, primarily because Eevee could be the worst or the best, and that's something I want to go into right now. Eevee has no actual weaknesses, except for fighting. That's what happens when you have a normal type Pokemon. But Eevee also has the disadvantage, or at least what I thought would be, that it's only appeared as the starter in one game. So I thought in Let's Go, where Pikachu, in my opinion, seems like the better option, it'd probably be a pretty bad candidate overall. And then you remember, it has an overpowered moveset. Suddenly, overnight, Eevee went from maybe an okay candidate to easily top 3. I'll give Eevee this. The only thing that is an issue with Eevee is that you have no incentive to pick Eevee normally. You can't evolve it in Let's Go, and it's honestly kind of just there. Late game especially. Pikachu gets things like Thunder. Eevee gets Helping Hand. Do you see the issue? Overall, Eevee is just a good Pokemon, and that's what mainly saves it. It's not bad at anything. If it wasn't for the fact that it was normal type, if it could evolve at all, it would be absolutely the best. By a mile. But sadly, that's not the case. Moving into the top 2, though, overall, I'd put Squirtle at number 2. Blastoise is very good late game and pretty good early game, and while it does kind of struggle in the middle, primarily because of an electric and grass gym leader back to back, then a poison, and a psychic, and Sabrina's just always difficult no matter what starter you pick. But overall, Blastoise is a pretty good option. The thing is, anything Blastoise does, Venusaur kind of just does better, and there's not as many grass type options for you. If you don't pick Blastoise, then you could get a Tentacruel or a Gyarados. If you don't pick Venusaur, it's like Exeggutor or maybe Vileplume. And even then, that's kind of being generous. Either way, it's just harder to replace a Venusaur than it is to replace a Blastoise. And Venusaur also does really good against all of the Elite Four pretty much, with little exception. I guess you could say it struggles against Lance in the same way every single Pokemon struggles against Dragon types. Except for Pikachu, I guess, because electric, but even then, it doesn't really matter much. However, as I previously hinted, I'm going to also be considering the Pokemon from every game. Who is the best individual Pokemon in an individual Kanto playthrough? So let's go through each game. In the original games, it's pretty confidently that you can say Venusaur is the best. Charizard doesn't have any flying moves really, and as such, it just kind of has a typing that is useless to it. In regards to Blastoise, it's a bit better, but even then, it's just a worse Venusaur in a lot of ways, and Pikachu fares absolutely atrociously. Pikachu is the most fun one, if you want to say that, then sure. It's like playing a game on hard mode with it or Charizard, which might be the reason that it's the most popular versions and or the two most popular Pokemon. Whenever I hear people talk about Pokemon, especially the Kanto region, they always mention Pokemon Red and Yellow and not Blue, even though Blue sold more than both, which another conversation for another day in regards to how sales actually work and what influences popularity. Who knows? Either way. In regards to Kanto, we can confidently say that in the originals at least, Venusaur's the best. However, in the remakes it gets a bit more interesting. First off, Charizard suddenly has a bunch of new moves which helps it dramatically. Specifically Metal Claw, Dragon Rage, and Air Slash. It doesn't hurt that Blastoise also gets more moves. Specifically things like Waterfall and even more water moves overall. It doesn't really make it a huge much like amount better, but it does help it. Venusaur kind of just stays the same though in the remakes, which is the main thing that's making me think that maybe it's not the best in the remakes. I dare even say that you could pick any of them. The remakes did a really good job of balancing the three starters, which I think is why the remakes are commonly played. That combined with the fact that Hoenn is a very popular generation, and so is Kanto, and so combining the two makes it incredibly popular. Overall, I guess I'm gonna give it to Blastoise. On one end, Charizard does improve, however, it's not enough to actually make it a serious threat to either, and Venusaur just doesn't improve much. I'm gonna give it to Blastoise, but I could understand if you go any way with this. And in regards to Let's Go, I think you could go either or. Personally, I'm gonna go Pikachu just because he actually has like type advantages. But even then, if you said Eevee, that's not a bad choice. There's nothing wrong with Eevee. There's just nothing good either. And I think that's the main thing holding me back from saying that Eevee's better. Now, you could also argue that the three starters are represented in Let's Go and how you can catch them all and all that. But if we're doing that, then it just turns into Bulbasaur again, because no one really improves, and unlike last time where Blastoise had a significant enough improvement for me to say maybe it's better, the additional grass moves just kind of make Venusaur a better version of what it's always been, which is the best starter. Overall, I might say that it could go either way between Pikachu and Eevee, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to go with Pikachu. Again, Let's Go did a really good job, just like the remakes, of balancing the starters, with Pikachu and Eevee being pretty fair. Now then, let's talk about who is the best Kanto starter in general. But before we do that, I'm going to tell you to subscribe, please. This channel does not normally get subscriptions, and honestly, it just isn't good enough quality quite yet. I'm kind of sad about that, but I also am trying my best, so who knows. If you subscribe, it would help a lot, and maybe one day I can make better content. Now, back to the video. In regards to who I think is better, I'm going to go with Pikachu. But now we have to talk about who is the best starter in all of Kanto. Is it Venusaur, Charizard, Blastoise, Pikachu, or Eevee? And we can pretty easily say it's Venusaur. In regards to the ranking, if we're doing this by game, I would say original or any Venusaur really kind of is the best. Second would probably be Blastoise, specifically from the remakes. Third, I'm going to give to Pikachu from Let's Go. I think you could argue Pikachu's actually better than Blastoise, weirdly enough. But again, Let's Go is a weird game, so who knows. In regards to Eevee, I think I would put Eevee at 4 above Charizard still. I'm sorry, Charizard, you just aren't good enough against Brock or Misty. And those are the two most important gym battles, like, period. Combine that with the fact that all of these Pokemon are pretty good. Kanto honestly did a really good job overall of giving us a very balanced starter lineup. One of these days, I would like to come back and maybe redo this topic if they ever remake Kanto for the 4th time. And I can't wait for them to do it with us having like 2 Kalos games, being X and Y, and then the Legends game. Anyways, I guess that's the answer to the question, Who is the best starter in Kanto? Venusaur. Second probably goes to Blastoise. Third goes to either of the Let's Go Mons. And last is Charizard. Sorry, you did good, Charizard. And as your reward, you get to be the most popular Pokemon for like the next 50 years. Anyways, guys, bye. I'll see you next time, and I hope, as always, you have a good day.